Hey everyone, Meltingman234 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of. When it comes to classic Disney films, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs is one of my personal favorites. It's one of those films I remembered watching a lot when I was a kid. It's just a nice simple story about a princess and an evil queen and all that jazz. Then, as I got older, I started to have more appreciation for this film after learning about its history of being Walt Disney's first full-length animated feature at a time when that concept was considered taboo. And yet, Walt was determined to get the film made, and his big gamble really paid off. And yes, Snow White is one of my favorite Disney princesses. I do like the others, like Jasmine, Ariel, and Mulan, but Snow White is still one of my top picks for how kind and caring she is. And again, I guess it's no surprise, since I also like Fluttershy for those same reasons. In fact, it all came full circle when they decided to do a Snow White themed event in that MOP mobile game from Gameloft. I know the character of Snow White's been criticized and all of that, and I think some of it is unnecessary. There's already videos defending the character, so go check those out, because otherwise we're gonna be here all day. Oh yeah, then there's that whole live-action remake that recently came out. Didn't really bother seeing it in theaters. Will I eventually see it? Well, only if I'm really bored and feel like watching it on Disney Plus whenever they get around to dumping it on there. Anyway, let's move on to a topic that's become a mainstay for this series: comic books. Yeah, now when it comes to official comics that feature characters from Disney's Snow White, there is a lot of them. Like, a lot of them. Adaptations of the film, new adventures being told, featuring new characters like the evil queen's brother, the Wicked Prince. Well, at that time, they were all played by the Muppets. And that's not even counting all the random crossover stories they've done, like when the dwarves met Dumbo, or the time they met Thumper, or the other time when they helped out Santa Claus. It doesn't help that there isn't a definitive list on how many there are exactly, especially when some of them come from different countries in Europe. So, for the sake of my sanity, I'll just be looking at the Snow White retelling by Dark Horse Comics, that was released in 2019. I remember finding these at a comic store I used to go to in my old home state, and luckily I was able to get all three of them to enjoy. It starts off as you would expect with Snow, working as a maid to the castle, now ruled over by the evil queen. We get to see more of Snow's time working in the castle, and how the staff try to keep her out of sight whenever the queen is nearby. But she still gets along with the others, like Greta, one of the other maids of the castle, the huntsman, and of course the nearby animals. She's kept very busy when news goes around about a prince visiting the kingdom. She tends to the horses at the stable when the prince shows up, though he doesn't reveal who he is, so Snow thinks that he's part of the prince's party. After that, they spend some time together, just hanging out and chatting for a while, until they're both summoned away for their own duties. Later on, we see Snow White taking the queen's food to her chamber where the magic mirror is. She does feel uncomfortable being there, but she tries to tell herself that despite her stepmother being cold to her, she believes that the queen does care for her stepdaughter. And the queen shows up and seems annoyed about Snow White being there, especially when getting a look at her face. But she still remains calm and tells Greta to make sure that she doesn't disturb the guests. Then we get some more familiar settings, with the wishing well, Snow White hoping to see the man again, which she does, and the man reveals that he's actually the prince. And despite Snow White being startled by this reveal, she still wants to spend some time with him again. But the moment is cut short when Greta arrives, saying that Snow White must attend to an errand for the queen, which also means she changes into her trademark dress. She's escorted by the huntsman, and it goes as you would expect. He tries to kill her by orders of the queen, he doesn't want to go through with it, tells Snow White to run away, she gets lost and frightened in the forest with her imagination running wild, only to later calm down when she meets the forest animals. They lead her to the cottage, she decides to clean up the place in the hopes that her kindness will convince the owners to let her stay, and she ends up meeting the owners, 7 to be exact. Now, this is where things get interesting, where in the movie, Snow White stays at the cottage for like a day or so before the climax happens. But here, they stretch it out to several days. At first, the dwarves decide to let her stay for one night, but they decide to let her stay longer after seeing her hard work and being able to spend more time with her after their trips to the mines. And I do like how we get to see Snow White doing more than just making food for the dwarves, like seeing her fix a hat rack, fixing a door, and other things. Quite the hard worker she is. Then the queen shows up disguised as the old hag, though of course Snow White doesn't know who she is. She tends to the old woman, and the hag gives her an apple for her kindness. If only she knew it was a poisoned apple. After this, things get a bit weird. In the movie, we see the dwarves chase the hag up a cliff and is later finished off by a bolt of lightning. But in this comic, we just see a silhouette of the dwarves going after the hag. In fact, there's one bit of dialogue where one of them says that they fought her, which never really happened in the film. So, considering the fact that we never actually see them chase after her, and just basing it off of the silhouettes, then yeah, I guess they really did just beat the shit out of her in this version. And despite Snow's current situation, the dwarves couldn't bear to bury her, so they fashioned a glass coffin to look after her. Well, until she decomposes or something. Then the prince arrives, saddened at the loss of Snow White, kisses her as a way to say goodbye, she awakens from the sleeping death, and they all lived happily ever after. And that's pretty much it for this comic adaptation. The story mainly focuses on just Snow White, and certain scenes aren't present, so you might need to be familiar with the movie first before checking out the comic. It does follow the usual beats while adding stuff to it, like seeing more of Snow White's time in the castle and looking after the cottage. If there's one thing this comic improves upon, it's the prince. In the movie, the poor guy barely got any screen time, especially when you take into the fact that the animators at the time were really struggling on the look of the character, and they already had their hands full with trying to make Snow White and the Queen look convincing. So in this version, we spent a good amount of time near the beginning, seeing Snow White and the prince just casually hanging out together, before the whole wishing well encounter. And it's very cute. And her extended time at the dwarf's cottage was also nice, with how she always manages to find something to do instead of just making food for the dwarves. The rest of the characters are all done well. The familiar characters all act like how you would expect, and despite there only being one new character, I think Greta is fine. Someone for Snow to talk to and does care for her well-being. The art style is also nice with soft colors. Some of the designs might look a bit off, but I think it's alright. My only gripe with this comic is seeing all of Snow White's inner monologuing. It happens quite a lot, and most of the time she's just pointing out the obvious. When no one's talking and it's just her own thoughts that we see, that's just fine, but most of the time it happens when there's already spoken dialogue happening, and that can be annoying. Other minor complaints being the fact that Doc doesn't have his mannerisms of mixing up his own words, or the fact that there are some scenes where Sleepy and Sneezy's dialogue get mixed up for some reason. But either way, it's a good retelling, and worth checking out if you're a fan of Disney's Snow White. It's probably one of the more affordable comics to find when compared to the really old stuff that they've done. Well, that takes care of this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.